I never thought a simple home purchase would turn into a battle for justice. When my wife and I first moved into Maplewood Estates, we were excited to settle into a peaceful, well-maintained community. The HOA, Homeowners Association, promised security, order, and fairness, a structured environment where every homeowner contributed to keeping the neighborhood beautiful. We had no reason to suspect that the very system designed to protect us was actually draining our wallets for someone's personal gain. The first sign of trouble came in the form of an unexpected HOA fee increase. A letter arrived in our mailbox, stamped with the official HOA seal, informing us that our monthly dues would increase by 25% due to urgent maintenance and infrastructure repairs. The notice lacked specifics, but as someone who had worked in auditing for over a decade, I knew vague financial explanations were often a red flag. I mentioned my concerns to my wife, but she brushed them off at first. "It's probably just inflation, sweetheart. Everything is going up these days." I wanted to believe that, but something about the sudden increase didn't sit right with me. I decided to attend the next HOA meeting to understand exactly where our money was going. When I arrived at the community hall, I was surprised by how few homeowners showed up. The HOA board members sat at a long table, facing the small audience of residents. At the head of the table was Richard Daly, the HOA President, an older man with a permanent frown and an air of superiority. He was the type of person who spoke with authority but never provided real answers. The meeting was filled with a lot of talk but very little transparency. Richard droned on about necessary expenses and rising costs, but when I asked for specific financial breakdowns, he dodged the question. "If you have concerns, you're always welcome to review the HOA records, provided you follow the proper procedures," he said with a smirk. That was all I needed to hear. A real leader wouldn't hesitate to show proof of where the money was going. I didn't know it yet, but that moment was the beginning of something much bigger than a fee increase. It was the first crack in a corrupt system that had been running unchecked for years. Later that night, as I sat in my home office, I pulled up the HOA bylaws and financial statements from past years. I cross-referenced the numbers with public records and noticed something strange. The expenses had been increasing every year, but there were no corresponding improvements in the neighborhood. The park was still in disrepair. The sidewalks were cracked. The community pool, which was supposedly undergoing a $50,000 renovation, remained closed. Where was the money going? I didn't have the full picture yet, but one thing was certain: something was very, very wrong. And I was going to find out exactly what it was. The deeper I dug into the HOA's financials, the more unsettling the situation became. The numbers didn't add up. Over the past 5 years, expenses had tripled, yet our community looked exactly the same, if not worse. The park was still overgrown, the pool remained closed, and even basic maintenance, like fixing broken streetlights, was long overdue. Late into the night, I pored over old financial reports, scrutinizing every expense listed under maintenance and community improvements. That's when I noticed something strange. A company named Daly Property Management had received multiple large payments from the HOA's budget. At first, it seemed normal. After all, HOAs often hire outside firms to manage landscaping and repairs. But a quick business record search showed that Daly Property Management didn't exist, at least not legally. That's when my stomach dropped. The HOA president's last name was Daly. Could it be a coincidence? I wasn't one to jump to conclusions, so I started tracing the payments. One entry in particular caught my eye: a $78,000 transfer to Daly Property Management labeled as a special maintenance project. I cross-checked it with meeting minutes from that time. That amount had supposedly been used for community road repairs. But there had been no road repairs. I felt a surge of adrenaline. Was Richard Daly funneling money into a fake business to steal from homeowners? If that was the case, how long had this been going on? I needed proof. The next morning, I decided to do a little fieldwork. If Daly Property Management was real, it should have an office, employees, or at the very least, a website. A quick online search turned up nothing. No address. No company history. No online presence. This was fraud. And if I was right, Richard Daly was embezzling thousands of dollars from innocent homeowners. But I still needed solid evidence before I could make an accusation. I decided to take my findings to Emily Carter, my neighbor and a former attorney. Emily had lived in Maplewood Estates for over a decade, and she had always been skeptical of the HOA. When I showed her the financial documents, she shook her head. "I knew something wasn't right," she muttered. "Daly has been running this HOA like his personal kingdom for years, but no one's ever been able to prove anything." She studied the payments carefully, her eyes narrowing. "If this is what I think it is, he's committing wire fraud, tax evasion, and possibly even forgery." That's when I realized I wasn't just dealing with mismanagement. This was full-blown criminal activity. Emily suggested we approach the other homeowners. If we could gather enough support, we could demand an independent audit or even take legal action. That evening, we started making calls and knocking on doors. At first, some neighbors were hesitant. "It's just HOA fees," one woman said. "What can we really do?" But when we showed them proof, the fake company, the missing money, the rising fees without improvements, people started listening. By the end of the week, we had a small but determined group of homeowners who were ready to fight back. I knew one thing for sure: Richard Daly had been stealing for years. And he had no idea that his luck was about to run out. The more we uncovered, the more infuriating it became. Richard Daly had been running this scam for years, and no one had questioned him. Why? Because he had built a fortress of fear around himself. People hated dealing with the HOA. They were afraid of retaliation, unfair fines, threats of liens, even legal action. He had bullied the community into silence, and for a long time, it worked. But not anymore. With the evidence we had gathered, Emily and I decided it was time for a confrontation. We needed to force Daly into a corner, but we had to be smart about it. If we accused him outright, he'd deny everything, and worse, he might try to cover his tracks. We needed to set a trap. Our plan was simple. We would call for an emergency HOA meeting and request a full financial disclosure. If Daly refused, we would present our findings to the entire community and demand an independent audit. If that still didn't work, we would go public, file complaints with local authorities, notify the IRS, and take legal action. But we didn't expect what happened next. The moment the emergency meeting was announced, Daly panicked. Instead of responding professionally, he sent out a mass email claiming that certain members of the community were spreading false accusations against him. He called us troublemakers, saying we didn't understand the complexities of running an HOA. Then, to everyone's shock, he raised the HOA fees again, by another 15%. It was a desperate move, and it backfired immediately. Homeowners who had previously ignored our warnings woke up. They wanted to know why fees kept rising while nothing was improving. The last straw came when a retired couple, who had lived in the neighborhood for 30 years, revealed that they were being forced to sell their home because they could no longer afford the fees. That's when the entire community turned against him. At the meeting, Daly walked in with his usual cocky smirk, probably expecting to silence us with intimidation. But this time, it didn't work. I stood up and spoke first. "Mr. Daly, we've reviewed the HOA's financials, and we have some serious concerns." His smirk faltered slightly. "Such as?" he asked, crossing his arms. Emily took over. "For starters, can you explain why a company named Daly Property Management has received over $300,000 in HOA funds, yet no such company exists in state business records?" Silence. A few murmurs rippled through the room. "And can you tell us why a $78,000 payment was made for road repairs that never happened?" I added. Daly's face turned red. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. "I don't have to answer these baseless accusations." That's when we played our trump card. Emily pulled out printed documents, copies of bank statements, transaction records, and even emails linking Daly's personal accounts to HOA funds. "We have proof," she said, holding them up for everyone to see. The room exploded. People were furious. Homeowners started shouting, demanding answers. A few even stood up and called for his resignation on the spot. Daly, sweating now, tried to backpedal. "This is a misunderstanding," he stammered. "There's a logical explanation for all of this." But no one was listening anymore. The entire neighborhood had seen the truth. Daly had been caught red-handed. And his empire was about to crumble. The moment the proof hit the table, the entire neighborhood erupted. The once silent homeowners, who had tolerated years of Daly's bullying and corruption, were now furious. "You've been stealing from us this whole time," one woman shouted. "I want every cent of my money back," an older man yelled, slamming his fist on the table. Daly looked overwhelmed. His usual smug expression was gone, replaced by panic. He knew he had lost control. But he wasn't going down without a fight. "This is an attack on my character," he bellowed, his face turning red. "You people have no idea how much work it takes to run this HOA. I've kept this neighborhood in order for years, and this is the thanks I get." Nobody was buying it. Emily stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "Mr. Daly, this isn't about your hard work. This is about the fact that you've been stealing from us, lying about expenses, and using HOA money to pay for your personal life." She held up a document. "Here's a payment of $15,000 to a luxury resort in Hawaii. Would you like to explain how that was necessary for HOA business?" Daly's jaw tightened. Then I added, "And this? A $22,000 withdrawal from HOA funds made on the same day a brand new Mercedes was purchased in your name. The crowd gasped. People who had once supported Daley looked at him in disbelief and disgust. It was over. But then something happened that no one expected. Daley snapped. His calm facade completely shattered, and he went into a rage. "You people are idiots," he screamed. "You wouldn't last a day running this HOA. You're all just jealous because I made something of myself while you waste your lives complaining about trash cans and lawn heights." A stunned silence fell over the room. Then, someone laughed. At first, just one person. Then another. And another. Within seconds, the whole room was laughing at him. Daley had lost all credibility. He was a joke now. That's when someone stood up and said the words that sealed his fate. "I motion to remove Richard Daley as HOA President, effective immediately." The entire room cheered. Daley's face drained of color. He knew what was coming next. "All in favor?" someone asked. Nearly every hand went up. It was unanimous. Richard Daley had just been fired in front of the whole neighborhood. And he was about to face something even worse, criminal charges. The moment Daley saw every hand raised against him, his entire body stiffened. The man who had spent years bullying, manipulating, and stealing from the community was finally powerless. You can't do this," he stammered, his voice shaking. "I built this HOA. Without me, this place will fall apart." Nobody was listening. Emily, standing at the front of the room, looked at him with icy confidence. "You have 30 days to vacate your position and hand over all financial records. Refusal to comply will result in legal action." Daley's eyes darted around the room, searching for someone, anyone, to defend him. But the very people who used to fear him now glared at him with pure contempt. Even his former allies had turned their backs. Then, I stood up. 30 days is too long," I said, folding my arms. "Daley, we all know you've been stealing from us. And we're not going to give you a chance to cover your tracks. Effective immediately, you're suspended from all HOA duties. The new interim board will take over while we conduct an official investigation." The room erupted in agreement. Daley gritted his teeth. "You have no right to." "Actually, we do," I cut in. "And since we've already contacted the authorities, you'll be dealing with more than just an HOA meeting very soon." That's when Daley's face drained of all color. Because at that moment, he saw them. 2 police officers standing at the back of the room. Daley turned as pale as a sheet. His mouth opened like he wanted to argue, but no words came out. The officers stepped forward, their expression serious. "Richard Daley?" one of them asked. He didn't answer. "Sir, we have some questions regarding financial misconduct and misappropriation of funds," the officer continued. Daley staggered backward, bumping into the table behind him. The tough, arrogant man who had once terrorized the neighborhood suddenly looked like a trapped animal. You can't arrest me," he stammered. "This is just a misunderstanding." The second officer pulled out a warrant. "We have evidence suggesting otherwise, Mr. Daley. We'd like you to come with us for questioning." Daley spun around, looking for an escape, but the doors were blocked by the crowd. His panic turned to rage. "This is a setup," he shouted, pointing at me and Emily. "They're framing me. I've done nothing wrong." Nobody believed him. Instead, the entire room watched in silence as the officers took Daley by the arm and started leading him away. Then, someone started clapping. It was a slow clap at first. Then another person joined in. Then another. Within seconds, the entire room was cheering as their corrupt HOA president was escorted out in handcuffs. As he passed me, Daley snarled. "You'll regret this." I just smirked. "See you in court." And with that, Richard Daley, the man who thought he was untouchable, was gone. With Daley finally gone, a wave of relief swept through the room. Neighbors who had once lived in fear of his ridiculous rules and sky-high fees now stood shoulder to shoulder, victorious. The energy in the air was almost electric, as if the entire neighborhood had just taken its first real breath in years. Emily turned to me, a triumphant smile spreading across her face. "We did it," she said, almost in disbelief. I nodded, scanning the room. Faces that had once been filled with frustration and helplessness now held hope. It was a feeling that no amount of stolen HOA money could ever buy. But the fight wasn't over yet. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. The interim HOA board, made up of actual homeowners who cared about the community, began untangling the financial mess Daley had left behind. I personally helped audit every transaction, uncovering a shocking trail of stolen funds, fake invoices, and personal expenses disguised as neighborhood improvements. "This guy was practically running a Ponzi scheme," I muttered one evening, sifting through bank statements. Emily let out a sharp laugh. "No wonder he was so desperate to stay in power." It turned out that Daley had stolen over $150,000 in HOA funds, enough to renovate homes, fix broken sidewalks, and install actual community amenities. Instead, he had funneled it into his personal bank account, funded luxury vacations, and even made a down payment on a second home. When this evidence was handed over to the authorities, the case against him became airtight. And then, the news broke. The headline that shocked the town. One morning, I woke up to my phone buzzing nonstop. Texts. Missed calls. Voicemails. When I checked the news, I saw why. Former HOA President Richard Daley indicted for fraud and embezzlement, facing up to 10 years in prison. I nearly spit out my coffee. The article went into detail about his financial crimes, listing every shady transaction we had uncovered. It also mentioned how he had been denied bail, with prosecutors arguing he was a flight risk. Emily called me minutes later. "Did you see the news?" she asked, her voice barely containing her excitement. "Oh, I saw it," I said with a grin. "Karma moves fast, huh?" The news spread like wildfire, and for the first time in years, the community was united, but this time, in celebration. A new beginning for the neighborhood. With Daley rotting in a jail cell, the HOA was completely restructured. Gone were the unjust fines and random violations that had terrorized homeowners. Instead, we focused on actually improving the community, installing new lighting, fixing roads, and even setting up a neighborhood park. People who had once dreaded HOA meetings now actually attended them voluntarily. Instead of pointless debates over mailbox colors, we discussed real improvements that mattered. For the first time in years, the HOA was doing what it was actually supposed to do, serve the homeowners. And as for me? One evening, I stood on my porch, looking out at a neighborhood that finally felt like home again. No more stress. No more fear of ridiculous fines. No more corrupt leadership. Just a community of people who fought back, and won. I took a deep breath and smiled. Justice had been served. And I had never been prouder.